I'm Ken Steele. Welcome back to another 10 with Ken. I'm starting this season with a series of episodes on what I'm calling forward-looking facilities. Last time, we focused on the impacts of COVID-19 and its lasting implications for the post-pandemic campus. Today, we turn to the new work experience of staff and faculty and how that will reshape work-life balance and the nature of work, on campus and off, in what's going to be a very fluid future. How can architects and designers build campuses out of bricks and mortar that will nonetheless be flexible and adaptable to an unknowable future? Let's take 10 and take a look. When I say the future is fluid, I'm saying it's not just turbulence with wave after wave of surprises, but it's fluid in the sense that none of it is very fixed in stone. As Yoda once told us.
Difficult to see. Always in motion is the future.
The future is not fixed in stone. It's in motion. It's fluid. Everything we do now changes it. But it's also increasingly a world where traditional black and white binaries are blurring too. So it's fluid the way gender is fluid for generations Y and Z. It's fluid like computing is going to be in the era of quantum computing, when we move away from ones and zeros, binary computations, to shades of gray and a bunch of probabilistic prediction models. Quantum computing is something I don't want to have to understand, but it's all part of this brave new world we're entering of fluidity. And higher education, I think, is going to see this fluidity as we blur the line between what in-class and online learning looks like, between what virtual and reality looks like, between learning and the workplace, and we blur those lines. What a university is, what a college is merging and blurring, and what human and artificial intelligence is blurring as they start to work together. All of those exciting changes come ahead. They're challenging to us because they are blurring the old certainties and making everything a little less simple. And we see that from a facilities point of view, in particular, with the shift to fluid work and relationships, allowing for hybrid and remote work for staff and faculty is complicating things on our campuses. We know that about a third of higher education professionals are saying they're looking to change employers or to leave the sector completely. There's a lot of stress, burnout, and frustration, financial strains on their salaries. People are eager to look at their options, and in response, we need to be flexible. It's the number one way employers are trying to retain employees. There's a division among staff and faculty about who would like to stay remote, who would like to be on campus again. But there's always some at each end of the spectrum, frankly. And it depends on the nature of what working from home looks like. If you've got high bandwidth, a nice polished office and quiet space, or if you're working from the living room while the children are jumping on the couch, totally different experience of work from home. We're also seeing interesting experiments in the higher ed space to be flexible with employees. Université St. Paul in Ottawa has offered its administrative staff a 4-day work week option in which they work 4 8-hour days, but get paid full-time, get full-time benefits. And apparently the productivity doesn't lag any more than it does at thousands of other companies that are experimenting with the 4-day work week. If people are going to have hybrid and flexible work arrangements, they're going to have to give up a few things. They may have to give up a physical, dedicated office space in exchange for hoteling. Seneca College has a new building with several floors that are devoted to hoteling space for staff who are coming and going to use the space rather than to have their own dedicated office where they can lock the door. Touchdown spaces, hoteling. We're seeing more and more employers tell us they can save about a quarter of their real estate by creating more flexibility in their workforce. And the open floor plans that implies means that we also see interesting experiments. How do we create privacy and quiet if you want to have a phone conversation? Or if you want to do a Zoom call? It doesn't work to have an open floor plan if everyone's on Zoom at once. I think it's interesting to shift our mindsets a bit from how many employees can we squeeze per square meter to how do we make the workspace appealing enough that employees want to come in and collaborate and spend time together there. And so experience per square meter is the way Marika Arvelid puts it. And I like that turn of phrase as a way of sort of shifting our mindset. We are seeing, no matter what the delivery format, a growing awareness that we need to offer flexibility and support mental wellness on our campuses. And this is, in fact, been true for a long time. When we're looking at facilities, we think about wellness in terms of physical ergonomics, in terms of ventilation and lighting, sit-stand desks and adjustable ergonomic chairs, all of those kinds of things. For our students, we look at their wellness in a lot of different ways. There were students during the pandemic who couldn't access the emergency online delivery of their courses. My poster child for this is Alexei Dodolodov in Siberia, who had to climb a 20-foot tree to get a cell signal to connect to his online courses from Moscow. That's kind of the worst case scenario. But during the pandemic, even students who had all the comforts of home and high-speed internet, but were stuck with their parents on the couch, found it a mental wellness issue to be participating in education this way. And that sort of sense of diverse fortunes, diverse preferences. The reality is, as Gervin Fearon pointed out back when he was at Brock, the reality is that we were not being fair to underrepresented and disadvantaged groups before the pandemic. The pandemic has shone a spotlight on that, and now we're much more aware that we need to do a better job of that. To support wellness in a variety of ways, I think one of the biggest underestimated drivers of the mental health crisis on our campuses is sleep deprivation. And so we're seeing more and more campuses looking at how do we support students who don't live in residence? How do we allow commuter students to have beds they can bunk in? How do we create napping stations and various sleep pods on campus? Those kinds of things. For other kinds of anxiety repercussions, we're seeing growing awareness that we need to provide multisensory stimulation rooms or snoozling rooms where students can go to try to de-stress. Maybe we're creating exam anxiety lounges, or what the University of Alberta calls a calm room for students during exam period or just prior to starting a high stakes exam to try to calm them down. There's been more and more widespread attention to wellness and mental wellness, and obviously architecture and the way in which we structure spaces plays a role in that for our staff and students. So the big challenge, of course, when we're dealing with inflexible materials like bricks and mortar, furniture, wiring, how do we cope with this increasingly fluid future when we have to make decisions that are set in stone? Buildings have to predict the future. And it's been said that what we need to do is to try to make sure that it doesn't matter if our predictions are wrong. We need to be as flexible as possible. Put another way, the architects of Cornell Tech in New York said they were building a campus that would still be useful 50 years in the future by trying as much as possible not to plan it, to create flexible spaces, open floor plans. Obviously, you resort to as much modularization as you can when you want something hard that is still flexible. So whether we're talking about modularized cabinetry, whether we're talking about unitized demountable wall systems, more and more emphasis on creating spaces that can adapt, because we really can't predict where we're going to be in 20 years, what kind of spaces we need in a building. And we're seeing more and more of these on every campus now. We're even seeing the buildings themselves being constructed in prefab modules. This is an example from Harvard where they could afford to build whatever they wanted. They chose to build something modular that could be moved to another area of campus, could be restructured or enlarged at any time. In a lot of ways, that's how higher ed is responding to these times of turbulence and the fluid future ahead, is we are trying to figure out how to be flexible is increasingly about how to be modular. I think we're even seeing this in curriculum as we look at the modularization of courses, badging and micro-credentialing as ways to allow flexibility for students to assemble their learning at varying paces in varying pathways using little modules that are interchangeable. There's so much more to say about the fluid future for higher education that I'll be offering it as a standalone masterclass soon. Stay tuned for more details. This is the second of 5 episodes on what I'm calling forward-looking facilities. We talked about hybrid and remote work. Next time, we look even deeper into online and blended learning and student preferences for various learning modalities. To be sure you don't miss it, you should really join me on my new free online community, Eduvation Circles. Circles is a growing virtual community of more than 1,000 forward-looking higher ed leaders and professionals from across Canada and around the world. It's more immediate than an email newsletter, more interactive than a blog, and a great way to engage in year-round discussion, polls, and live streams with me. New episodes of 10 with Ken will appear first here, along with a full archive of past episodes. But if you're not quite ready for the future of online engagement, sure, you can just subscribe to 10 with Ken on any of a dozen platforms, including YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, or even subscribe to my weekly email newsletter at 10withken.com. Thanks again for watching.